And greetings, welcome to The Dividing Line. My name is James White. I'm looking at a tweet here. I just got done doing the Calvinist Batman podcast, which was interesting. Very, very interesting. Check it out next Tuesday, I think, is when it's going to come out, something like that. We talked about all sorts of things, and I rambled on a lot. I did a lot of rambling at that particular point in time, but it was good, and it was well worth things. And you know, when Rich comes in and starts, when he's looking down at the floor and looking at connections, that probably indicates something isn't. Hey, something isn't working quite right. But it's working now. Anyway, welcome to the program. I've got a lot to cover today. We only have an hour. I'm going out of town. And I've got to get in the car and get going if I'm going to get where I need to go and stuff like. And that's why we're doing it uber early in the morning. I mean, this is very, very early in the morning. Only 9:30 in Phoenix. This may be one of the earliest Dividing Lines we've ever done. Actually, come to think of it, I'm not sure we've ever done anything much earlier than this. Want to start in with a graphic that I posted on Twitter and Facebook. Listen with me for a moment to Psalm 101. I will sing of loving kindness and justice. Chesed is the term for loving kindness in Hebrew. It's a beautiful word. Chesed puts together love, agape, philos from the New Testament. It puts together pistos, faithfulness. It puts together eleos, mercy. It's just an incredible term. And so when you hear people say to you, the Old Testament God is this mean, terrible, angry God. Only in the New Testament do you get love and mercy and stuff like that. It's just not true. Chesed appears more often in the Old Testament than the correlated terms do in the New Testament. Of course, the Old Testament is larger than the New Testament, so numbers is sort of relevant anyways. But I will sing of chesed and justice, mishpat. A term that some conservative Christians aren't quite as focused upon, mainly because it's been misused in our day, but the reality is mishpat is the foundation of God's throne in the Old Testament when you think about it. To you, O Yahweh, I will sing praises. So it seems to sing of loving kindness and justice, that's what praise to God is about. It's involved in that. You can't really praise God if you're not praising who he is and what he does. I will give heed to the blameless way. When will you come to me? I will walk within my house in the integrity of my heart. I will walk within my house in the integrity of my heart. Why do you think you would say that? Well, because we know that there's a difference, sadly, in how people behave publicly and how they behave privately. And the point of the psalmist here, what this psalm reminds me of is like Jonathan Edwards' what were they called? Not commitments. The name just escaped me. His resolutions. And yeah, you know what? I don't know if you had. By the way, I need to. The DL is live now. I forgot to do that. Most people don't know unless I tell them, and so I forgot to.
Actually, our YouTube channel automatically notifies our subscribers the moment we go live.
Well, that means they have to be subscribers.
Well, then they should be.
Well, this is true.
And we have a lot of subscribers, but we could, always use more. So subscribe to the Alpha and Omega Ministries channel, and you'll get notifications as soon as we get to go live.
Okay, good. We are live. We just let people know. Good. Back to Psalm 101. This is like this psalm reminds me of Edwards' resolutions. And if you've ever read Edwards' resolutions, they probably depressed you madly because they are so high and so demanding that no one, I don't know how anyone, unless you are just absolutely massively sanctified in this life, could ever keep them. And when you fail, and Edwards failed, you better understand something about forgiveness and mercy and grace and things like that along the way, or you're just going to be constantly depressed. But at the same time, we need to have those kinds of resolutions. And that's what Psalm 101 is like. Yeah, see, even Kofi didn't know. So when dividing line at work, this was a surprise. Yes, sorry, I did mention it. You posted it, and I mentioned it on Twitter. So it's and on Facebook, I think. So there you go. What we're called to in Psalm 101 is a high standard. And just because we know that we are going to need grace and forgiveness when we don't meet that doesn't mean that it should not be a passionate desire to strive for that standard. There's no question about it. So I will walk within my house in the integrity of my heart. That means I will seek to be consistent throughout my life in these matters. And what the graphic that I posted was from verse 3. I will set no worthless thing before my eyes. I hate the work of those who fall away. It shall not fasten its grip on me. A perverse heart shall depart from me. I will know no evil. The specific phrase, I will set no worthless thing before my eyes. I put together a graphic on this because it seems to be an area where we have lost functional piety amongst quote-unquote evangelicals or Reformed. And what I mean by that, pietistic is generally a negative term. And it generally speaks of a surface level religiosity that really doesn't translate into life. But there is a positive use of the term pious and piety. In this phrase, I will set no worthless thing before my eyes. One of the things I mentioned when I posted the graphic was this requires us to have a consistently biblical worldview that will allow us to properly assign worth or worthlessness. I mean, you can't, this is the negative, worthless thing. It's literally an empty thing. And it's davar, which, it's interesting, davar in Hebrew, logos in Greek, very similar semantic domains for obvious reasons. But they're such basic words that you can have logos used in John 1:1 specifically of the word who becomes flesh, second person of the Trinity. But then in Romans 15, I think it is. Is it Romans 15 or is it Hebrews? You have reference to there's I have to look it up. I was just going off the top of my head there. But to where logos is simply used of things. Just a very broad use of things in general. And here it is a thing of worthlessness. It is, davar has the same, it can be a word, it can be very specific, or it can be just simply a matter that has no value. A matter that is, it could be frivolous, or it could be worthless in the sense of pretending to have worth, but it doesn't really have worth. There's a lot of different which it can be understood. But the only way that you can identify a worthless thing, a thing of emptiness, is if you have a positive definition of what a worthy thing or an important thing would be. That's the only way you could do it. And so you have to have a worldview that allows you to assign worthiness. Now, immediately we encounter conflict with the world today at this point, because the fact of the matter is, today we are told that, well, if a transsexual assigns worth to their new gender, then everybody else has to assign the same value to their decision. And that obviously destroys the meaning of worth. It becomes a totally subjective thing. And if this phrase is going to have any meaning to us, I will set no worthless thing before my eyes. Is that just worthless thing? Is that just a sense of how I feel about things? For example, on the food level, sushi is worthless to me. Okay, no. Cooking is good. Cooking is a good thing. Okay, sushi is worthless to me. And yet I had a big debate with everybody on Saturday over veggie bacon. Okay, and Rich is already across the window is just ready to lose it because of veggie bacon. Veggie bacon is worthless to many people, but it has worth to me. Is this just a matter of taste? Is this just Mexican versus Italian? Actually, I like both of those. That wouldn't work for me. Is this Italian versus Chinese? That works for me. One I like, one, no, I'd starve to death. No, it's not. And for the psalmist to say what he's saying, it's very plain that what's going on here is that there is a standard, and it's God's standard. It's a standard of loving kindness. It's a standard of what was the terminology he used up there? Of justice, wisdom, that allows him to say, I will set no worthless thing before my eyes. Why? Because my mind is focused upon that which has value in God's sight. And so we're not talking about adiaphora here. The term adiaphora refers to things that don't matter, the things that don't make a difference, things that do not define what is, well, you're probably all thinking about the same text I am in Philippians chapter 4. Finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, and interestingly enough, that's dikaia, which would be related in the Old Testament primarily to Zedekiah, but also in some context, the same Hebrew word that was used in verse 1 and 101 in regards to mishpat. Whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is of good repute, if there is any excellent, and if anything worthy of praise, and those forms are not, if there is, we're not sure. It could be translated since. So there are things of excellent, there are things that are worthy of praise. Dwell on these things. Literally, lagidzestha, tauta lagidzestha. Ponder these things. Let these things take up your mind. We all know that we daydream. We all know that all of a sudden we catch ourselves. What are you thinking about? What are you focused upon? What gives you pleasure? What does your mind dwell upon? The apostles' exhortation is to have a standard of these things. And this, of course, is what comes right after, and the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Your heart and your mind needs to be guarded. It needs to be guarded. That is a incredibly important concept. And for the Christian, that peace of God is available to us. And part of how that peace of God will guard our hearts and minds is if we are focused upon what is true, honorable, right, pure, lovely, good repute, excellence. And these things are all defined by Christian worldview. They're defined by recognition that we have a creator who has made us. We have a creator who has defined for us by his creative act and by his redemptive acts in history what is pleasing and good in his sight. And as his followers, that should be what we desire to contemplate and to think about. And so when we think about Psalm 101, I will set no worthless thing before my eyes. It's the same idea as Philippians 4. We have the decision to make as to what we are going to expose ourselves to. Now, there's a limitation. I guess what I should say, what we voluntarily expose ourselves to. We cannot leave the world. And unless you're going to drive down the road with your eyes closed, which I do not recommend, then you are going to see and encounter that which is opposed to the Christian worldview and to be offensive to you. It's going to happen. Anymore in Western culture, you can't drive down the road. Where was I? I think it was when I was in Norway last year. Yeah, I think it was when I was in Norway last year. We come around a corner. I'm being taken to the airport. Come around a corner, and the road, the sign along the road, I'm not sure that she had clothes on. I'm really not certain. I mean, it was explicit. Right there on the roadside. And you can try to turn your eyes, but you've got to have seen it long enough to realize what it is before you can even know to do that. And so you not only have that kind of thing happening, but we're not talking about trying to create a safe space for Christians either, where we're not going to be offended and all the rest of that stuff. We're talking about what your heart dwells upon, what you find yourself thinking about and contemplating, and what truly makes you happy. And I don't mean happy and happy as in joyous. And I'll be honest, one of the things that brought my mind back to this phrase was a movie that came out. And it's not Risen. I haven't seen Risen. If I could find the time, I probably would. I'd like to. It sounds really interesting. But I haven't seen it yet. So I wasn't talking about Risen. There's a movie that came out. I don't know if it came out this weekend or last weekend. I don't know. I don't follow this type of stuff. I'll admit. But evidently, it's supposed to be sort of a comic superhero comedian thing that I had never heard of until, I don't know, just a few months ago when stuff would start popping up on social media stuff. I guess it's called Deadpool. And I took the time to track down the trailer for it. Once I read some stuff coming across my feed. And evidently it is a hard R rating. Just barely missing. Well, let's put it this way. Probably 10 years ago, it wouldn't have been an R rating. So, huge amounts of profanity. And huge amounts of nudity and sex on screen. I guess the attraction is it's some sort of superhero something. I don't know. Some guy, I guess, has cancer or something, and some nefarious group cures him of his cancer and makes him indestructible, but now he has to... I don't know. I really don't care. But it caused me to think about what we voluntarily put into our minds. Now, I'm not a prude. I am not a King James only fundamentalist Baptist. I do not wear a bow tie, white shirt, black pants, and squeaky black shoes from the time I get up in the morning to the time I go to bed at night. I certainly don't wear that while riding a bike. And I have seen R-rated movies. But let me compare and contrast. I would never go see this movie, this Deadpool thing. I see no redemptive value in it at all. But let me compare it with an R-rated movie I did see and that I would defend seeing and that I think you have the soundtrack to, probably still sitting out there. And it's, if not, the CD used to be sitting there for like 15 years. So now you know which one I'm talking about, right? I went to the theater to see Saving Private Ryan. I don't even know when that came out. Could you Google that to find out when that came out? I saw Saving Private Ryan, and I'd see it again. My daughter's saying, what? Okay, 98. My daughter says I'm butchering the description of Deadpool. Well, that's fine. Hey, I just watched the trailer. If the trailer's that far off, what can I say? I went to see it, especially after I read articles that noted that D-Day veterans, and there were more of them around back then than there are today, that D-Day veterans were seeing the film and were coming out in tears. And when they were asked why, they said, that is the only film that got it right. That is the only film that recreated what we experienced on Omaha Beach. And one of the things, by the way, that they said that really caught my attention, because I do read a lot about World War II. I'm a little over halfway through a book on the relationship between Eisenhower, Patton, and Bradley right now, which is fascinating. It's fascinating. Because I do not believe we could do what we did then today. I do not believe that the worldview that is held by the vast majority of United States citizens would allow us to do what we did, to sacrifice the way we did then. I just don't think it could happen anymore. Which is a dangerous thing, because there's still plenty of people who want to be a Hitler or a Mussolini or, interesting, a Stalin, which is part of the strange thing about World War II. Anyway, but one of the things they said was that it sounded right. In other words, the people who made the film made it sound like the actual events. Because in all the movies up to that point, what you'd hear is that's not what you hear. Those guns are a long ways off. What you hear is the bullets hitting things, the thuds and that's what you hear. The actual sound of the gunfire is far away, and the close-up sound is the sound that it makes when it rips flesh, when it bounces off steel, when it hits water. And so when I read that, I said, I need to see this. I need to see this film. Now, it's R-rated. There's profanity in it and a lot of violence. because that's what happened. That's what people experienced. And to understand that generation, to understand that experience, I do not think that there is anything morally wrong. I'm not saying that everyone else should go see it, but to understand what happened to that generation, because honestly, when you think about it, something happened post World War II. Look at what happened to England. Look at what happened. Those people experienced something that absolutely fundamentally changed their worldview, and that changed what they taught their children, and that led to the 60s. We all look back to the 60s. Well, who were the 60s? Who was in charge? Who was doing this stuff in the 60s? The children from the returning veterans. Something happened. So I see a huge difference between purposefully exposing yourself to something like that, which happened in history and can help you to understand history and can help you to understand and evaluate what's going on in your day, and something like Deadpool, which doesn't do anything. It's not real. It's, it's just vacuous, mindless entertainment. Well, amusement. And remember, muse means to think, alpha privative, to not think. It is not thinking. So I've got someone saying Deadpool is a violent parody of Marvel superheroes. But yeah, Saving Private Ryan is far more meaningful. Yeah, I got that feeling. I got the feeling that what it was, that there were... Yeah, now that I think about it, yeah, it does seem to be a mockery of the Marvel superheroes. Okay, I got it. Again, it seems to be extremely immoral in a lot of what it has to say. So, at the very least, what we need to understand is, I will set no worthless thing before my eyes requires each one of us. If you're going to make that commitment, then you have to have thought through the grid you're going to use to determine whether something is or is not worthless. And the balance, and this is sort of going back to what I talked about back in December when I did that program on stuff we should divide over and stuff we shouldn't. Calvinist Batman was asking me about unity, because I guess last week he had Michael Brown on. So Mike and I got to talk about each other without knowing we were talking about each other. And some of this goes back to that. We have to have absolute convictions about what God has revealed about his truth. But we also have to recognize there's Romans 14. And there's 1 Corinthians. And there's never going to be a time in this world where we are clones of one another. And finding that balance is not merely a matter of emotion. Well, I feel. I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, I know I'm a Scotsman. But I have emotions, believe it or not. But I recognize the Bible tells me I am not to be ruled by them, but I am to rule over them. That I have been given a mind, I'm to have the mind of Christ. I am to have a Christian worldview. I am to treat the Messiah as Yahweh in my heart, and that is going to create a set of priorities that I'm to apply all across my life. Now, that means I have to leave room for brothers and sisters who come to different conclusions, not on the Trinity or the gospel or something like that, not on the stuff where the apostles say this is what defines the Christian faith, but in other areas. But all of us should listen to what the psalmist is saying here and not just dismiss this as some overzealous Jewish guy in the past. There is something good, right, true, honest, and just in saying, I will set no worthless thing before my eyes. There's something true, honest, and just and good in saying, a perverse heart shall depart from me. I will know no evil. Now, he's obviously not saying, when it says, I will know no evil, that, well, I'm going to be ignorant of evil. It's literally ra, lo, eda. So that is something that you are doing. See, when we use the term know in English, generally we view that as a passive thing, the taking in of knowledge. This is actually a call from yada. Yada means to know. But this is, I will not purposefully seek to know, to enter into relationship with, to make a part of me evil. I will purposefully eschew it. This is Psalm 1. I will not walk in the way of evildoers. I will not put myself in a situation where I am surrounded by these things and I am purposefully engaging these things and sullying myself with it. And again, you have to have expended specific energy to have created a filter through which you are bringing these things that is built upon Scripture. It's not built upon tradition. It's not built upon bigotry. It's not built upon, well, this is how we've always done it. But that it really has a consistent biblical matrix to it. What I'm talking about is serious Christianity. What I'm talking about is taking your faith seriously and applying these standards to all of life. All of life. I was not in thinking about this. I was not in bringing this up. And now I'm going to have to address it because I've thought of it and I bet you some of the rest of you are too. I was not thinking about particular political movements or individuals today. Really was not what I was thinking about. But I would say that a certain event that took place last weekend, what was it, Friday? Was it Saturday? I forget when it was. But I commented on the exchange that took place between primarily Jeff Durbin and Steve Camp. And I was going to do a screen flow video on it, and so I typed up these notes and then realized, I used complete sentences, punctuation, everything else in the notes, so why waste the time reading the notes? Just post the notes. People can read. And so I know what happened there. It's interesting. You may interpret what happened there differently than I do. Rich interprets it differently than I do. He heard things differently than I heard them. But the point is, it should not simply be a matter of, well, Jeff Durbin has a beard, so I go with Steve Camp. Who cares? Who cares? What you should have been listening to in that conversation was, it sounded like it started off real well. And then all of a sudden, the wheels fell off. And while you can say part of that was Jeff's interview style. Jeff wasn't interviewing, he was inserting himself into it. Well, some people would say that. The real issue was worldview and presuppositional, and it goes to the impact of one's eschatology. It really does. I mean, if you didn't hear that what Jeff was challenging is that you have to use specifically Christian parameters in the selection of someone who is going to be asked, if someone, let's put it this way, and I should have included, I always think of stuff I should have included in the notes. If you think that the next president will be held accountable by God for what he says and does, then obviously you as the voter must use specifically scripturally based parameters in selecting that individual. If you do not believe that a president will be held accountable for what he does as president, but only be held accountable for who he is as an individual, then you don't have to use biblical parameters in the selection of that individual, because what he does is not actually directly relevant to what he's going to be judged for. And I remember having a conversation with somebody about 15 years ago about the New Covenant theology stuff. And that was one of the issues. Was what came up was, I asked the question, do you think, this was way back in Clinton. This is how long ago this was. I said, I remember it was at a conference, and I said, do you believe that President Clinton will be held accountable for what he has done in regards to the abortion issue? And I forget who, I don't even remember who it was I was speaking with, but a New Covenant speaker said, probably. Okay. But the individual said no. He will only be judged as an individual. He will not be judged for what he's done as president. So if you take that perspective, then you can divorce Christian worldview, morality, consistency. You can divorce all of that from your selection, because it's not going to be held accountable for it anyways. And so what was going on there was one side saying it's constitutional issues that you judge on and not these other things. And the other side saying that can't be done. And it went back to a fundamental eschatological issue, but that never really got fleshed out. That sort of didn't happen, unfortunately, in that situation. Oh, yeah, sure, you want to...
I'll be nice. To be honest, I grieve that it was posted. I honestly...
Didn't it have to be?
What's that?
Didn't Steve's tweet make sure that it would be?
I wish that Steve could have retracted that, and the two of them could have come to a point to where they decided humbly that it was a thing to do over. The attempt had value.
Yeah.
And I just wish that both of them could have found a way to do it properly.
Well, that's what I said at the end of my notes, but I don't know that that's not still a possibility. And I'm not sure there would be much pressure to have that happen if it hadn't been.
I would agree with that, but I think at this point it almost screams. I mean, I found it very ugly.
Well, yeah, it's unfortunate that it turned out the way that it did. But I'm not sure that some people would say that some of my debates turned out pretty ugly too. Some of the Syngenis debates, I mean, that first debate with Syngenis, that might fall in that category.
Yeah, but we are talking about two men that are believers.
That's right. That's
true.
That's true.
Even though they come at their eschatology from two different points of view, if they could have merely restrained themselves, I think the entire attempt could have had value to all.
Well, I'm not certain that it won't eventually. And hey, it's causing us to talk about it now, so maybe that's where the value comes from. I don't know. But my point is, getting back to the issue here, that was not why I brought this up, but it is relevant in this sense. When you listen to that encounter what are you truly thinking through the worldview that you're bringing to what you're hearing? Can you filter out your prejudices? Can you filter out, and this is what concerns me most, folks, and this is where I have felt convicted over the past number of years. It's far too easy for many of us to let our prejudices determine what we hear and what someone is saying. I know that person disagrees with me on such and such a topic, and therefore I heard them say this. I get this all the time. I get this constantly in social media. I get it. I mean, I see stuff on my Twitter feed that absolutely leaves me dumbfounded. I will say something and I thought it was clear what I was saying, and someone will respond and I'm just like, how did you get that from what I said? And sometimes I don't respond appropriately. I think sometimes the best thing you do is just hit block real quick and just allows for peace. But if I do take the time to think it through, or if I can find out something about the person, sometimes it is educational to figure out why they heard me say what they think I said. And almost always, well, for example, there's anti-Calvinist derangement syndrome, where a Calvinist can't say anything that has any meaning whatsoever, can't do anything that's right. Roman Catholics will hear me saying things in a certain way. Mormons will hear me saying things in a certain way. I get that. If I've said your religion is wrong, I get it. But when it's my fellow believers, then it gets a little troubling. It gets strange as to why for so many there is no extension of any grace, no extension of any possibility, and it all comes down to just such little things. I mean, sometimes it is eschatology. And I'm going to tell you something. If I ever get to the point where I won't listen to what someone who has a different eschatology from me has to say, that doesn't mean I'm going to ignore it. It doesn't mean that remember, 2 years ago or so, the one post-millennial guy, name is skipping my mind because I wasn't even thinking about going this direction today. It was about 2 Timothy, and things get worse and worse, and so on and so forth. And we had a real disagreement as to whether this was going to be the normative state of the church or whether it was just a temporary thing. Hey, I could not engage in a discussion of the exegesis of that text without recognizing this person is bringing a post-millennial perspective to it. And is that determining the exegesis, or the exegesis determining the eschatology? That's important. But at the same time, if that man is talking about so many other things, am I just going to dismiss him because I disagree with him on that one issue? For a lot of people, yes. For a lot of Christians, yes. If they don't look like me, if they don't sing the same songs I do. And don't get me wrong, it's wonderful when I get to go overseas and go into a congregation where we're singing the same songs and things. That's wonderful. But it's not necessary. It's a wonderful thing, but if someone sings different songs, well, maybe you'll get to learn a different song. I just realized, by the way, I'm badly pixelated over here, and that now it helps me understand why I look weird. Still bad. What I'm saying, I guess, I guess I'm going back over ground now, and so I'll try to move on. I had a video to move to here, but in all of this, my fellow elder a week ago exhorted us from the pulpit that especially at this time where there are political issues, that we need to extend tremendous grace to our fellow believers who may support candidates that we do not support. Now, I'm having a little bit of a hard time with that myself these days, to be perfectly honest with you. But there are men in my own congregation that support one particular candidate that I, for the life of me, cannot begin to figure out how anyone ever could. Okay? There's one particular candidate, I just view the man as a complete demagogue. As a person who values consistency throughout one's life, you can sort of guess who I'm talking about. And you can sort of guess who I like because of consistency throughout life as well. You know, it's pretty easy. But, I cannot allow that to cause me to show disrespect to my fellow believer. Now, I've gotten a lot of that from this particular politician's followers, and I've been blocking a lot of people because they tend to be extremely sensitive, and they tend, like their candidate, to be profane in their language. And I've always said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And if you want to stop a conversation with me, throw profanity in. That'll pretty much do it. But hey, I'm struggling with that issue myself, and maybe I'm just preaching to the choir here. But a year from now, this is going to be over. And personally, I don't see almost any positive outcome in any scenario at all. I mean, wow. Bernie Sanders? Really? Honestly? I'm seeing Bernie Sanders signs all along my running route in my neighborhood. And every time I run by, I'm sorely tempted to turn around, run up to the door, knock on the door. I just want to see what you look like. Can we have a conversation? I'd like to. Could we talk? And it hasn't happened. Anyway, back to the issue here, because we actually need to wrap up here in a few minutes. I will set no worthless thing before my eyes. I believe what that's calling us to do is to, as believers, recognize that we're created in the image of God. He made our minds, and that therefore we are to exercise discipline. Sophronismos is the Greek term. It's a beautiful term. It doesn't exactly, it's sort of like some German words. It doesn't sound real nice, but sophronismos, sound mind, discipline. There has to be a disciplined creation of standards of worldview that will allow you to then determine what is truly of worth and what is truly not of worth, what is worthless. I don't see a lot of people in much of what calls itself evangelicalism being challenged to think through that issue and to regularly pray that God would give them that kind of perspective. I don't see that happening a lot. And what I'm saying is it's vitally important. It's vitally important. And I think the more clearly we understand the central issues and what really matters, God's purpose in this world, the demonstration of the glory of the triune God, the proclamation of the gospel, that the gospel is the power of God into salvation, that the church has been entrusted with the gospel, that we are to live in light of the gospel, we are to be gospel people, we are to seek sanctification, because the person who is walking in holiness is the person who is going to be in the best position to model and proclaim the gospel, to make application of the gospel within family, within society, focused upon the central issues. the more we're focused upon the central issues, the less likely it is that we will get off into the weeds on things that don't matter. And that doesn't mean that we don't debate issues of difference between us. If you feel that something really impacts the practice of the church, the health of the church, fine, be willing to debate it. But why can't we recognize that Paul wasn't Peter? Why can't we recognize that? Oh yeah, they're both held the same standard. Paul opposes Peter right in front of everybody and says, you are not walking straight in accordance with the truth of the gospel. Got it. But that was the gospel that was under discussion there. Do you really see Paul and Peter as clones of one another? They have different emphases. They have different audiences. It's very clear there were certain people that Paul would have been the best person to minister to them, and others that Peter would have been. It seems that for many people who would be a part of my audience, and hence are concerned about apologetics and things like that, we tend to lose balance. We lose balance because we demand that everybody look like us, and talk like us, act like us, and cross their T's and dot their I's just like us. And we don't allow Paul to be Paul and Peter to be Peter. And as a result, we end up very frequently slamming the door on sources that could be very beneficial to us. You can actually learn from people who don't believe everything that you believe exactly. Some of you just heard me say, stop being discerning. I didn't say that. I did not say that. But what I did say is there is a vast difference between discernment and prejudice. And the mature Christian will want to know what the difference between them is. So, just some thoughts that ended up wandering farther away from where I started than I imagined. But don't skip over these texts. You know, sometimes it's real easy to look at the psalmist saying these things and, the psalmist got up on the wrong side of the bed that morning or something along those lines. And no, he didn't. Oh yeah, there's some tough stuff here because it goes on to say, whoever secretly slanders his neighbor, him I will destroy. Well, David had the power to do that kind of stuff, you know. No one who has a haughty look and an arrogant heart will I endure. And it's really easy to go, well, look what David did. In other words, no matter how high the standard, we always need grace because we're always going to fall. This isn't a work salvation system. This isn't a grounding for some kind of Pharisaical attitude. My eyes shall be upon the faithful of the land, that they may dwell with me. He who walks in a blameless way is the one who will minister to me. He who practices deceit shall not dwell within my house. These are the words of God. Every morning I will destroy all the wicked of the land, so as to cut off from the city of the Lord all those who do iniquity. This is the godly king seeking to bring godliness to a covenanted nation. And what it tells us is holiness is a good thing. Holiness is a good thing. Don't let people do the Puritan, making the Puritans sound bad to you. Holiness is a good thing. But holiness without a recognition of one's own redeemed state always leads to either a personal piety or to Pharisaism. Always got to be a balance. There's always got to be a balance. Hey, before we run out of time, can I talk to you about next year? Next year. Can I talk to you about almost next month? Sorry. we still need to raise a lot of funds to get to South Africa and to England. I think I need to look this up. Let me see. Okay, it should be right here. Here it is. Oops! I need to let Rudolph know. I put Tuesday. I thought that I made that mistake. I'm going to keep that on the screen so I can type to him afterwards. Lord willing, on Thursday, the only way we can have Rudolph on is if we do this in the morning again, which is better for, it seems to be better for the feed for some reason around here anyways. So on Thursday at 11 o'clock is when we'll do the next dividing line. And that'll be 8 o'clock in Joburg. And hopefully, not because I said Tuesday, so I'm going to try to have Rudolph Bushoff back on, not for the whole hour or anything, but I want to talk about what we're doing in Cape Town, what we're doing at Potchefstroom, and what we're doing in Joburg in South Africa. And then going from South Africa to London, and hopefully having some events there in London as well. It's going to be a long trip, longer than I'm accustomed to taking. Going to need a lot of prayer, but it's also going to, especially the South Africa, London stuff, where I'm not doing stuff in London where churches are sponsoring, but I'm doing debates and things like that. We pay the freight. We pay the freight. And we don't have big donors that just come along and say, hey, I'll cover all this. We just don't. I guess it's my looks or something. I just do not attract big donors. Yes.
To emphasize, this is not a point where the churches where you're going have the ability or the funds to be able to finance this.
They're smaller churches. Yeah.
All grace. This is, but it needs to be done. This is really important.
Yep. Yeah. Very, very, very much so. So we've moved the time from normally end of September, October. It need to be May. That's just around the corner. We need to start booking flights. We need to start getting those final arrangements made. So please, we need your assistance. Please consider helping us. There is a travel link on the support us portion of the website. And so if you can assist us in this way, if your missions committee at your church does specific events or support somebody going to someplace to do something, that would be something that would be really great as well. But we're moving things up, and because of that, we really need to come to you and say this is a pressing need. It really, really is. So aomin.org, support us, and Lord willing, we'll see you 11 o'clock our time, which is 1 p.m. Eastern time, here on Thursday, hopefully joined by Rudolph to talk about South Africa. And something tells me something will have happened between now and then we'll probably need to be talking about too. So thanks for listening to my rambling all over the place today. God bless.